Continues. President Trump's former national security advisor, Mike Flynn, says he's willing to be interviewed before Congress in the Russian election rigging conspiracy theory investigation. That's like the longest sentence of all time. Anyway, as long as he's assured that he won't be unfairly prosecuted. Imagine that. Well, Flynn's attorney released a statement last night that read in part, General Flynn certainly has a story to tell, and he very much wants to tell it should the circumstances permit. No reasonable person who has the benefit of advice from counsel would submit to questioning in such a highly politicized witch hunt environment without assurances against unfair prosecution. Sounds reasonable. Well, the mainstream media, all excited, they think Flynn's going to drop some sort of bombshell and take down the president, but I told them last night on CNN, and the president had my back today when he tweeted, Mike Flynn should ask for immunity, and that this is a witch hunt, excuse for big election loss by media and Dems of historic proportion. So what story does Flynn have to tell? Here with analysis, official political guru for America Trends, Barry Nussbaum. Very good to have you. Happy Friday. Happy almost April Fool's Day, B.
You too, and I just want all of America to know I'm in the Gina Club, best club I ever joined.
Aww.
Get in.
Oh, that's awesome. You got a big response from the control room, but no one can hear them up here. They don't know that. Anyway, Barry, I think the media is getting far too excited. And I noticed this last night on CNN. You know, I'm sitting there on CNN, and I'm thinking to myself, they are missing the actual story. There is a story here that I think they could make some hay out of in terms of the Trump administration. And that story is about the things that are happening internally between the Freedom Caucus and the president and all of that. But they're totally missing that story, Barry, because they are so fixated on Russia, 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 that they literally, when this whole statement came out last night, Barry, they were sure, they ignored the word witch hunt in the statement by the attorney, and they were sure that this meant that General Flynn had something and he was going to take down the president. I saw the word witch hunt right away, and I knew that was code language to the campaign, to the administration, and to people like me that this has nothing to do with taking the president down. This is about the left's witch hunt, and this would be an indictment of them. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think there's three stories here, Gina, and they're all in parallel tracks, and we need a new narrative. The story number one is General Flynn apparently had a conversation with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador to the United States, that he neglected to tell Vice President Pence about because the discussion took place in December before he was officially in office. That was a big screw up on Flynn's part and probably was grounds for his dismissal because it lowers the confidence of the president and the vice president in their head of national security. But that in and of itself is not a big scandal.
No. The
big scandal that's the parallel to this is whether or not the Russians meddled in our elections. And they're trying to tie that somehow, that there was a quid pro quo being discussed between Flynn and the Russians having to do with the elections, which is crazy, absurd, and there's not one shred of evidence to say the Russians affected the outcome of the election.
Despite having investigated this with all barrels from the lamestream media pointed on the administration since July, Barry, and they still have not one single shred of evidence, but they persist. Go ahead.
Well, there's no evidence that one vote out of the hundreds of millions that were cast was changed. Not one electoral vote would have gone in a different direction. Not one ballot was screwed with. The bigger story, the much bigger story, which is not being given the exposure it deserves, is going to be as big as Watergate. And that is that innocuous Trump tweet that went out several weeks ago saying, they spied on me, shame on them. Guess what? He was right. And Nunes is releasing more and more information, the head of the House Committee on Intelligence. He's now been briefed and has seen the evidence as of about 30 minutes ago that came from a very high-ranking intelligence official that shows that the Trump family, the Trump transition team, and the Trump staff were scooped up in an eavesdropping that took place after the election, before the inauguration, apparently authorized at the highest levels of the American government. And the big laws that were broken when there is an inadvertent eavesdrop on domestic citizens, and the incoming president qualifies under that, you're supposed to mask the information. In other words, anything that's inadvertent that is outside the scope of the FISA warrant is not to be released and not to be disseminated. And instead, apparently, the White House, that would be the last administration, disseminated this information across numerous intelligence agencies and did not delete the names. This is as big as Watergate. And you're not seeing it on CBS every night, are you?
Well, actually, Barry, CNN brought that up to me twice yesterday when I was on CNN, and they are talking about it, but they're using it as evidence that something fishy is going on in the White House, not as evidence, a confirmation of the fact that the Obama administration did actually spy on the president. They're all concerned that the information from the apparent witnesses, as reported in the New York Times, went to Congressman Nunes, and that Nunes then took it to the president. So that, therefore, concludes that the Russians gave the election to Trump, and it's over and done, and Trump needs to be indicted. I mean, literally, that's where the left is coming from in this narrative.
And here's the third story, and it was a perfect segue. God, we worked well together,
Oh, man,
Gina.
we're good.
I appreciate that.
Quick, Barry, we're almost out of time.
The third story is the eavesdropping had nothing to do with Russia. Nunes has already said that. Russia was never mentioned on any of the eavesdropping, and yet the eavesdropping continued illegally.
Imagine that. Imagine that. Trump proven right again. How many times does this have to happen, this circular motion? Barry, thank you so much for being with us.